for when you do show up with particular questions, this is a space to bring those to the table. So you showing up with any questions on your mind today?
Yeah, I've been thinking, this is mostly roles play such an important part on both the systems that we have currently, course and project. So I've just been thinking about how to make sure that those roles, those contexts remain separate, because they're very different user journeys, and just wondering how to protect those routes or whatever, so that you don't end up in some other role context, and you get a clean user journey from beginning to end. That's what I've been thinking about.
Thanks. I've actually been thinking about that one too. And when I think about things that, we're working on together, one of the features we've been discussing is how do you make sure that a specific commitment can only be made by a certain access token holder. So anybody who's used Andamio v1 knows that we don't have that feature implemented. So that might be something we have a chance to build together. But yeah, in terms of how I'm showing up, pretty excited. I'm starting to look forward to this time where we're just starting to open the doors. We're going to get a little bit more formal as we move into the start of 2026, but really appreciate everybody being here for this very informal launch of something that's going to grow up over time. I'll share screen here, and I just deployed the notes on the questions I took, but I'm going to share the agenda on localhost as well, so we can see those questions without waiting for them. Actually, before we do that, of course, we're keeping notes for this whole project here on the Andamio documentation site. Here's the live link. When I navigate into the docs, we have a section for Andamio pioneers. Here's the getting started page with some quick links to the things we talked about last week, where you are invited to use and run locally the Andamio T3 app template. You'll need these environment variables, and all this stuff is going to change over time, but we'll keep it up to date on this page so that you can get started quickly. Now, we're making changes frequently. And so if you've worked on a TypeScript project before, you might be familiar with this, but just know that it's likely that you'll have to, wipe your node modules directory and pull down the latest via npm install, because we're publishing little patches to, for example, the Andamio DB API on a regular basis. So if things break, just let us know. Those are examples of finer tuned technical questions that we might start showing up with here. There's a quick reference, same idea as the getting started page, and we'll distinguish between these as we start to have finer tuned resources. But most of our work is here on the live coding agenda. Okay, so you got a couple of getting started links, and then here we are in live coding. I'm going to go back for just a second. We have an archive with recordings and transcripts from the 2 meetings last Wednesday. Feel free to use these however you want. And then we have the live agenda right here. And as you can see, the Your Questions section didn't update yet. Oh, there it is. Okay, so we just deployed that change. So I can work from the live deployment here. So here's today's agenda, 17th of December. We just did an opening round where people shared how they're showing up and what questions they have. And here's a little overview of how live coding works. The goal here is to create a space for live collaborative exploration, see what happens. And in many ways, the less of a formal agenda we have, the more open we can be to whatever questions you show up with. And that's why the agenda is typically going to follow this pattern. We start with your questions. And if you have questions that are, relevant to exploration right now, it's the facilitator's job. I happen to be the facilitator right now. We'll grow facilitation over time. But it's my job to take these questions and think about in the moment whether these connect to some things we're working on. And then together, based on these questions, we'll build some stuff in public. The beauty of this is whenever you start to build in public, the way you measure the success of that is if it raises new questions. And that's why interruptions are really encouraged here, right? So whoever's got the mic, whoever's sharing screen, if you have questions about the thing they're talking about, the goal we want to achieve is that this is an open space to ask those questions. So this is a cyclical process. Then in each session, again, me or whoever the facilitator is, will bring a challenge for you. For example, last week and continuing to this week, your challenge is just to run the T3 app template locally. And if you've been a part of project-based learning courses before over at Gimbal Labs, we're doing the same thing here. The reason we issue a challenge is because one of two things will happen. You'll either achieve it and you'll be ready for the next step so we can keep going together, or you'll get stuck and you'll have questions. And that'll bring us back to the start of this looping process. So hopefully you can see how this kind of three-part agenda is just going to run iteratively as we run these sessions. Bring your questions, we'll build some stuff, we'll do some challenges. Anybody who needs to share a screen is invited to do that. And anytime building or working on challenges raises questions, we always come back to there. Any questions about that kind of meta pattern, just to frame our work? Okay, so in the opening round today, we had a check-in, and here's some of the questions that I heard, right? So first, this was from Newman. How can we work as a student network? How do we support networks of students, and what might these new tools do for us? From Harsha, how might Andamio integrate with existing systems? And I like how you framed that, right? Like, if we're cutting out some middlemen, basically, who are they? And are they going to mind? Let's think about where Andamio fits with existing systems. And then from Roberto, how can we make sure that roles and context remain separate? So for example, the teacher experience and the student experience, how can we make sure that it's easy for people to distinguish between those? How we doing? Am I saying these questions right? Did I miss something when taking notes?
That sums up mine pretty good. And Harsha's is hilarious. You know, if there is a middleman that we're cutting out, are they going to be pissed? It sounds very pirate-like.
Are we getting that right, Harsha?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't mean it in a funny way, but I do think if there's a group of people that'll like actively work against Andamio, it'll just suck for us.
Yeah. Nah.
And some of these questions really do take us into that theoretical realm. The other thing we're working on outside of live coding sessions, but as we start to open up other ecosystem level sessions, right? One of the things we're talking about inside the Andamio team right now is live coding is one thing, but also a session that's more general and not development focused, but really idea based as we look to inspire people for what they might do. We're working on some ideas for that. And some of those current ideas are starting to show up in the white paper. We're actively revising this. And so you can play with this to kind of see how our vision is coming along. So now related to these, right, this one is actually super current because what we are doing is we're refining the T3 app template. And like I shared last week, I'm also going to keep this list of focus areas updated. And all I did between last week and this one is I added one item to the top. We need to review the database API. And I was hoping to prepare this in time for this meeting, but I had a last minute request that's actually more related to Newman's question. So Cardano Foundation is looking at how they might use these tools. And so I've been thinking about how to frame the building of a student network with them. And I'll report back on that. But the reason I'm sharing that in this case is I actually haven't had time to do individually the thing I intended to. And that's maybe the perfect place for us to start, is by letting us take you under the hood with the Andamio database code base, just to understand what's going on there. Any objections to going that route? Is there anything else we might want to touch on before dipping in here?
That's fine with me. James, I just wanted to ask which, so I'm on the docs link for the white paper. Is all of those different tabs, introduction, trust, like it's sequential, correct?
Yeah, exactly. So that's arranged. We have the intro, and then these 5 sections are linked at the bottom of the intro. And
Yes,
those
sir.
are going to be updated. These were written a couple months ago, and we've learned a few things that need to be incorporated here. But you can take a look just to see where we are on the journey.
Yes, sir. Thank you. You know, not as technical minded on all the code stuff.
Oh man, let me know where you're at on the vision. And that's the thing. We'll look to you for advice when we start hosting, different kinds of community sessions as well. I want people thinking big about how they can plug in these tools and what it all means. All right. Let me jump over to the code base, and I will show you what I didn't have time to finish yet. All right, so the code base we're going to look at right now is not yet public. It will be soon. But this is running under the hood. If you have the environment variable for the Andamio database API, we're going to look at the source code for that API right now, okay? And to look at it, this is not a front-end application. So there's no like Next.js here or React or anything like that. It's just APIs. But the APIs are written with TRPC, just like is used in a T3 app. So if you've been on any of the teams working on a T3 app, the source code for this database API will look familiar if you've ever had your hands in the TRPC server directory. Let's look at our list of routers here. And a lot of these might look familiar, but this is one of those places where if you're wondering, oh, what do they mean by this term? If you see something on my screen that raises a question, really hope you'll interrupt me or throw a hand up. We've got most of the course interactions ready to go in this database, right? So if you're familiar with Andamio so far, you know we have some course functionality for onboarding contributors. And then we have some project management functionality where contributors go once they're onboarded to commit to tasks, submit evidence, that kind of thing. What we have right now from the on-chain version 2 perspective is most of the course transactions and on-chain APIs ready to go. And so we're going to focus on the course side of things now. And then project will follow with the same pattern. You might see a couple things related to projects, for example, treasury down here. But that's just because we have some initial database functions set up. Let's look at course first. That's kind of at the top level of things. And think about how this API is built. Okay? There's not too many imports. We're using TRPC. We're using Zod for validation. And we're using just some boilerplate functions that you would find in most projects using TRPC. And those are written in our source TRPC directory. Not much else. A couple of helper functions, and we'll look at why those are needed if we need to. Okay. And then we have all of these schemas. These are in a different directory, schemas/course. Let's look for that. Here it is, right? Same source directory as routers. We go up one directory into schemas, and we see that routers and the schemas directory have a lot of overlap. Okay. So the course schema This is just the one place where we define the inputs and the outputs for each of the endpoints we're going to use. And what this allows us to do, writing it this way, is to export these in a package that can be imported into the front end so that anybody using the API gets type safety, right? You know what you're getting. TypeScript comes with a lot of benefits. So when you see, for example, the IntelliSense in the T3 app template, it's coming from here. This is where those definitions are made. Internally to the project, we use these definitions in the actual business logic, right? So here we have an actual function for, what does it say? Get published courses, right? This is an actual database operation. You won't see any functions in this file on our database, right? Mostly we just have type definitions, right? And then we also have a couple of helper functions, but this is just taking some data and reformatting in a different way. So I can get a list of published courses. I can get a list of courses owned by some course creator. Here's the endpoint that handles the creation of a new course. Course, create course on submit handler. Now, the reason it has this slightly more complicated name, it could just be called create course handler. But what's unique about this endpoint is that it requires that a transaction has happened. We expect a newly minted course NFT policy ID in the endpoint, or sorry, in the request to create a course in our database. Now,
What's that?
Okay. No, go.
Oh my! Oh, yeah, oh man, this is like I had to suppress shouting out like 3 times, but this one went through. Yeah, so that is, so go through line 122, sort of, bit by bit, if you don't mind. So
excellent.
yeah,
Oh.
I mean, we could pause there. I was like, all of these, they're constants, but they're functions that are, they're functions that create that constant, and they're an endpoint for this route. So we're creating route endpoints with this because we're in routers. This is course TSS.
So you can
TS.
Yeah. So in TypeScript, of course, I can write functions 2 ways. I could say this, right?
Okay.
And if it was async, I would have to say like async function like this, right?
Right.
That's equivalent to saying const.
Yeah.
This thing, this variable is, what is it? Oh, it's an async function.
Right.
So those are, just remember, these are equivalent notation. I don't know which one is best practice.
I think it doesn't. They're both equivalent. I think it's just because they're exactly the same thing, right?
Right. It's probably worth having consistency. If we're not using this format consistently, we should make sure we're doing one or the other.
By the way, I think I found what Newman was talking about. If you go to the view in the thing and you can do open view, you'll find that outline. It's just a view kind of option.
Where do I go?
Like in the
In the
top
upper menu
or
where file, top menu, go to view.
Uh-huh.
And then there's supposed to
Open
be
view?
Appearance. Oh, there's the link. I put the link. Oh, no, anyways, I'll took it. Oh yeah, open view. And then there's in one of those options right at the bottom, there's an outline. And it shows up in your
oh, very nice.
Yeah, and if you drag that, okay. And so what you could do, okay, see, isn't that beautiful? Look, all of those on that level.
Oh, I like it. Very nice.
Yeah.
Helpful.
To
Yes.
see totally, like when there's I ran across a short video where it was like, don't scroll and on your code. And I was like, oh, really? Okay. and this outline thing. And what it does, I'll give this little caveat. What it does is it gives you that sort of that high level overview of like what it is. You can see all of those constant functions there.
Cool.
Yeah, sure.
Very good. Okay.
All right. Yeah, little tip.
No, that's really helpful. And this will help us look at the rest of this example. So also you asked like if we can go through this line.
Yeah. So there's that. Yeah, it's sort of like to drill down in there, like that input and the CTX, that's the context. So those are those the two arguments or parameters? And then there's the colon, which sometimes tells me like a type is incoming, but then it's followed by another. Yeah, so it's like a nested thing. So if you could parse that out for me, that would be helpful.
Okay. So to parse this, what we're going to actually do, let's go look at the documentation and see the end result of this. And then after we see the end result, we'll go back to that line and see where each part comes from. Okay.
Ooh, I like it.
So here in the Pioneers documentation, whether you go to the Getting Started page or the quick reference, you're looking right now for the Andamio DB API docs. So I just clicked this link right here, Andamio Database API. And the function we were just looking at, create course on submit, we can find that down here, course create on submit. And there's actually a couple of other details we're going to look at together in just a moment. But let's start with Newman's question, right? We have input and context. Well, first of all, the input, and you'll see this when we switch back to the code in just a second, matches this request body perfectly. Okay.
Title, course NFT policy ID. Okay.
Right. And let me switch back and forth just quickly, just so we can look at this really. Make sure. All right. So here, right, input is defined here. And what is the input? It's a course NFT policy ID and a title. Now the order doesn't, but it's right. It's the exact term. The snake case way this is written. That's why in Swagger docs it's showing up as snake case. Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
Now context. We're using context, for example, here and here. Look at these two different ways we're using it. One, we can run a helper function on the context. And what's the type of context? Well, this is one place where we need to improve the database. This does have a type, and actually get creator from context expects this type. Here it is, context.
Oh.
So it's already, the type is already created, but we need to just go through and refactor the API to make sure we don't have those dangling any's, right? And what is it, right? This is just where, this is the context file at the top level of our source directory, right? And that type, right, this type is defined and exported somewhere in here. Guess I could probably use my outline view too, but let me see. Here it is. Okay, so it's just inferred. Okay, that's a very convenient way. Infer the type from this function up above. Very convenient. Okay. So I'll make sure to pull that in.
Okay. That's good. Okay.
But what is it doing? Right? Well, it's doing two things. One, somehow, because of what's in the context, we can run a function like get creator from context. More on that in just a moment. And then the other thing we can do is operate on the database, right? The context that we are connected to, we have a database. And in that database, we have these different records. Find a course in the database that matches the course NFT we have submitted in the input. Okay. So that's one part. We have the database itself. The database we are connected to is part of the context. But this bit, all right, this bit, well, a course has an owner, okay? And this is very specifically true on the Cardano blockchain. A course has an owner. And if we look at the Andamio scan API like we did last week, and we'll continue to look at this, there's a relationship between an access token on Andamio and any course. Any course was created by someone, and that someone is the access token holder, right, who minted the course. So that's a special on-chain relationship. Our database needs to track that relationship, because what's on chain is great. That's our root of truth. But we also have some Web 2 interactions where we want to say, well, if you are the owner of that course, we want to allow you to change its title or add teachers to the course or write lessons, that kind of thing. And so that's why we have this line right here. First, let's get the creator ID of the user that's connected in context. And then let's use it. Where's creator ID used? Right down below. When we create a course, it will be created by that creator. Okay. So we don't need you to pass anything about yourself as input. We just need the course NFT policy ID of what you just minted on chain and the title you want to give it. But the only person you can assign to that course as the person who created it is yourself from context. So wait. How does that work? How do I know who this creator is and who's in the context and where does that come from? Let's go back to the Swagger docs for just a second.
Love it. Love it. I'm always a big fan when we see this.
Okay. Now let me point out, this is what I didn't fix yet. Okay. This is not a student transaction. This is a teacher transaction. And because I updated this very quickly in a flurry of work that we were doing together on Monday, I just haven't had a chance to go back and tell Claude where it was wrong. So we're going to do that today. And I want to show you where these things are defined well. We're almost there. Okay. But let's talk for just a moment about context. Now, these will all be correctly labeled by the end of today. But let me just find one. Course module delete. Yeah, you see, that shouldn't say public on it either. That should say protected. Only the owner or a teacher in a course should be able to delete a course module. Okay. So protected is the word I wish I saw here. And it says it up here, right? Auth can be public or protected. Here's our roles. Here's our systems. Okay. But anytime there's a protected route, what that means in practice is that a JWT is going to be required. Right? This stands for JSON Web Token. And this is a Web 2 authentication tool. What the Andamio API does is it says, okay, when you first try to connect to the app, we will create a Web 2 session in the database. This is all correct, right? This is an app thing. It's just offline, off-chain, right? General user role, public endpoint. Anybody can put in a request to log in. That's the only thing this endpoint does. Look, no request body. I can fire this right now, and I can see that it returns, right, an ID for the session I'm trying to create and a nonce. All right, keep that in mind. Now I take this session that's been created right here, and I ask the connected wallet owner to sign a message with their wallet that includes this nonce and session ID. And when they sign, it produces a JWT. Right? The output of this endpoint is going to be a JWT. But look, this has a much more complicated request body. I have to provide the ID of the session request I just made, my wallet signature, a signed message from my wallet with a public key, right? my connected address, my access token alias. And then we're going to take all of this and we're going to run some code and we're going to say, okay, does this address hold this access token? If so, keep going. Now, does the address that holds that access token, is that the one signing this validation request? If so, good, keep going, right? So the address you sent to the API and the access token, first of all, are those indeed in the same wallet? And then is it indeed that wallet signing against this session challenge? Okay.
Yep.
Harsha.
James, I have a quick question. So say, for example, I'm a random dev that does not want to build necessarily with the rest of Andamio APIs, but just the authentication APIs. Would I still be able to do that? Like just take these two APIs and like build my authentication part of my random app?
Okay. What we need to open source eventually is the code for how we achieved this. And we're trying to figure out the best way to do that, right? The way it's written right now will authenticate you to our database, but it's just a couple of environment variables to reuse this code to authenticate to a different database. So yeah, these patterns will be available for people to build out their own stores of data. And like DRAP platform could be a really interesting place to play around with this. You're already saving some data there. And we can, right, all it's doing so far is it's saying, well, connect your wallet, we've got you, right? But if you want to go an extra step there, like let somebody have works in progress or something, come back and edit their work later. I don't know where you guys stand on that.
Yeah. That makes, because in DREP also we have something similar where you are granted access based on like a token, specifically for Gimbal Labs. And we do the same thing, like we sign a nonce. We are not signing like a session ID, but we are signing a nonce. Yeah.
Good. Okay. So at the end of the day, what we end up with, and we can look at the example response, right? What we get is we get the JWT. This gets stored in the browser, and this is the key, right? This is, if somebody else got their hands on this, they could change the name of my course, right? Or they could write lessons as if they were writing my course. So we only want this locally in the browser. We want to make sure it's being transported safely. And we have a little bit of testing still to do there, but the bones are all here. And then we put a little bit of information along with it, right? Specifically the address and the access token alias. We say, well, once you've logged in, we don't want to have to check your wallet over and over again. We will assume that you are now connected with that wallet. And we destroy this whole thing when you log out. Okay. But this, when we say context, right? Okay. And we go back into where we're using CTX, get creator from context, and passing the CTX variable. What it's doing is it's saying, oh, well, in the context, I know two things. I know which database we're connected to, so I can operate on that. And I know which user is connected to it, so I can use that context for other functions. And so it's this bit right here. And the authentication against any protected endpoint by JWT. Let me see. I got to find one that's correctly private here. Yeah, I've made all of these public, so we're not going to say good. This is why I need to go back and fix this. But you can see here, like any of these that are protected status, that JWT needs to be included as a header, and you'll see that pattern in the T3 app template. Now, it's really inconvenient to do that. You can do this. You can log in by generating this session and by signing the session in your browser console with a wallet you're connected to. It's a pretty fun exercise, but it's not that fun. I'm not going to demonstrate that. Yeah. The convenience here is that this is what the T3 app does for us when we connect a wallet, right? We connect a wallet, the session bit fires, and then it automatically fires then the validation step. So you connect a wallet, then that signing screen shows up from your browser wallet. When you sign that message, it fires that signature back to this endpoint. Then you get the JWT if your signature is correct, and now you're logged in and ready to go.
Okay.
What I would recommend for people who, this is actually probably the thing I should demonstrate. Let's do this. Well, no, you see, I have to update the docs first. Whether it's later today or first thing in January, what I will show you is how you can get the JWT when you run the T3 app locally, and then you can use that JWT for all the protected endpoints. The reason it's not worth showing you that right now is I want to go through and fix these tags to make sure they're actually correct. So I want to show you where those tags are defined back in the code base. And I would say that our system here does still require some testing to be fully vetted to the point where we want it to be. So that's another thing I hope we can do together, is try to break it, figure out, does it work like it's supposed to? But we're pretty excited about the essential pattern there. All right.
Give it to Harsha. He breaks everything.
Break it, Harsha. That's the challenge. Okay, so we said everybody gets a challenge at the end. All right, so what I need to do in this code base is fix the tags. Let's figure out where those are, right? So we have this handler that's pretty nice, and it doesn't, I don't see, here, certainly in this router file, where those systems and roles are defined. But if you've been following along, you might recognize that we have this other thing called a schema, where we kind of painstakingly went through, right, and defined what's going to be there, right? And so if I look at the course schema, here's one thing I'm wondering about. Well, let's see. These schemas, these appear just to be what's happening at the output or the input level. So there's no additional metadata in these, right? Here's the input I need to create a course. Here's the input I need to update a course. I'm not seeing system and role. Okay, so we're happy with those, but what else do we see? Well, I look at my outline, thanks Newman, and we look at, eventually, right, we have all these definitions up top, right? And you see how each of these is called a handler. These are all of the functions that handle different requests. Some of them don't require input, right? Like courses, I don't need an input there. I just need the context. And this is a public endpoint, right, where anybody can just get the list of all the courses that are published, right? It's not a comprehensive list. It's just showing title, policy ID, course code, right? Like the basic stuff that we want anybody to be able to reference. But it's just a handler. It's not actually doing the thing. And so after all these handlers at the end of this file, here's our router. And this is the part that is you get out of the box, basically, in a T3 app. And this is the pattern that we're following to now actually expose each of these endpoints. But look at how elegant it is, right? This course list endpoint, it has an input schema that's defined elsewhere. It has an output schema that's defined elsewhere. It has the handler that's just defined above, right? In this case, owned courses, that's the second one. Where's the published course one? Well, we'll fix all, that's what we have to fix. But then here, this is where we find the metadata. And the beauty of this is that, right, for each of our systems, right, or I guess course we're calling this a resource in our API grammar. Now I can go through each of these methods, so course list, course check, right? Each of these methods inside of course router. And
look at that.
now each of them are very concise, right? We're pulling input, output, and operation from elsewhere. But we have this ability to very quickly update the OpenAPI metadata. And there's more to it than just those systems, roles, and authentication tags that need to be fixed. Also, just really nice other stuff that goes in the documentation. And the real beauty of this, my favorite part is right here, the path, right? Because if I want to change the URL of a given API endpoint, I only have to do it right here. Right? All the logic goes here. All the types are defined here. And as we evolve this product to make sure that our API grammar is precisely what it needs to be, we can refine it very quickly right here. Now, once we release this, we want to lock this, right? Because once we have people using this API on the published paths, anytime we change this, it's going to break somebody else's application. We're not there at this moment. We're getting there by January. And so we have, for now, this is our chance to keep refining these routes. Any questions here?
That open API stuff, because I'm fascinated with Swagger. One, it's a phenomenal name. But is this what Swagger builds from? Or what is open API and et cetera?
You know, they're intimately related. I actually don't know the formal way to describe the relationship. Anybody else want to take a
No. Yeah.
Nelson, what would you say is the formal relationship between the two?
The Swagger is just an interface where you just interact with the open API specification. So basically, yeah, either you have an open API JSON or open API YAML. It defines your API endpoints, params, headers, whatever, right? And you can render it in many ways. And Swagger is kind of the go-to for the industry. But there are other good ones. Everyone's using something called Scalar these days. It's what Blockfrost uses. It's what Stripe uses. It's a much more modern and more beautiful interface where everyone is shifting towards. But Swagger has been the proven, go-to for quick development and other stuff.
Okay.
And so it will be trivial if we build things this way with OpenAPI, it will be trivial to move to a different UX than Swagger if we do this right.
Yeah, that's just one
Right.
second thing.
And here, let me switch back to the web browser. In any of the Swagger links that you find linked from the quick reference, so whether I look at Andamio scan or the transaction API, maybe we're moving to Scalar, Roberto. Right, but any of these generate
example there, yeah.
Nice. Oh, cool. I'll open that in just a sec. Any of these generated Swagger docs will, at the top of the file, have a link to a JSON file. It's pretty small right here, openapi.json or doc.json.
And that's in our... So what if you click on that?
I'll show you. right? So when I click on this, this is just the raw JSON version, and I'll pretty print it. Here's a little checkbox in my browser,
Oh,
right?
Nice.
Right.
Okay.
So this is the generated Swagger that, excuse me, the generated Open API JSON that Swagger reads to produce this.
Okay.
Right. But like
Okay.
Nelson was saying, we could feed this same Open API JSON file over to Scalar, for example. Or another way I use this right here is I've trained our documentation repo, right? So we have an agent built into these Andamio docs such that I can hand it the latest Swagger JSON file, and it automatically generates pages
Some docs.
for us, right, in the docs. And so this is Andamio API documentation. This is a work in progress, but this is all auto-generated as well from Swagger, or sorry, from Open API, and with a small assist from the robots who add a few.
Who are our friends and who help us.
Right. And so this is another way to view that this will be a one-to-one match eventually with the Swagger API, everything we see here. At this moment, it's still a manual update, but it'll be automated in the next few months.
Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm fascinated with all of this. Yeah. Open API, Swagger, Scalar. These are the keywords I'll jump into.
These are ways of interfacing with each other, right? So we need documentation, and it needs to be useful to both people and machines, right? So the human readable way, we'll keep experimenting with the best ways to put that information in front of each other. But I can report very confidently that once the Open API JSON is correct, agents can do a lot with that, and that's something that we'll look at that in a hands-on way. But once again, the reason we didn't jump into that today is I still have just a little bit of that thing a human can do, right? And what's the human thing I have to do next? It's I have to go through here by hand and review the metadata for each of these endpoints in the system and just make sure that the system role and authentication level are correct. Why can't the robot do this? Well, it can guess what they should be, but the system doesn't exist yet, right? So we're defining for it the system, and once these are precisely created, we'll be good to go. So that's my next step.
Yes. Nice.
I'll push those changes, and we'll meet again in 5 hours or so.